What is the lady's name?
It's, one second, let me bring my. Yeah, we are just. There is only one speaker, but we're still waiting.
Omnia. Wait. Omnia.
Omnia. Yeah, Omnia. Because I can. Let's. There are here more. It's more seats. Yes, I have one, but maybe I need another one. Huh? Okay, just to check. Let me pull this. Yes, it fits better, right? Yeah. Let's see if we fit all here. What do you think? There, and then. So maybe we can start, and then.
She's coming. But
She's
she,
coming.
but I
Should
told
we
her-
start?
Yes, you
Okay.
have to start.
Okay.
You cannot keep all these ministers waiting, please.
Yeah. No, we're not waiting. So okay. Sorry. Okay, so we will start. Okay. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see so many people joining us today. Thank you for coming. I know it has been a very long day, so thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Verania Chow, and I am the thematic lead on climate, gender, and inclusion of the Climate Strategies and Policy team at UNDP. So I'm really happy, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. Today's event is a side event organized in collaboration between the African Group of Negotiators on Climate Change and UNDP, the United Nations Development Program. And the work that we have been developing and coordinating has also been with the support of the European Union. So we have today different speakers. You will hear from us today about different aspects. So first, we are going to hear from the chair of the African Group of Negotiators, Mr. Ephraim Shitima. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. We will also hear from Dr. Priscilla Achapka, who will present the findings and the recommendations of the technical paper that we have developed on the lessons learned and good practices on integrating gender into the climate change policy processes, particularly the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, and also the challenges that we are still seeing as part of this process. So Priscilla, thank you so much for being here and for sharing these results. We will also, as part of the discussion, to hear from our participants from different countries. We have today Ms. Pacifica Ogola, Director from Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, from the government of Kenya. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we are still waiting for our last participant, but I hope that Ms. Ominia Omrani, official youth envoy for COP27 from Egypt, will join us today. I would also like to make a very glad announcement, I would say, because today we have joining this session the Honorable Minister of Gender, Fatou Kinte. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we also have the Honorable Minister of Environment, Madam Roji Majam. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us tonight. I would like just to mention a few things. This process of integrating gender into the climate policy process, particularly the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, has been a process that has really pushed for integrating gender and social inclusion aspects into the core planning processes. And we know that this is not always something that can easily be done if we don't have, for example, enough information, if we don't have, for example, the analyses that are needed to understand the gender differentiations, for example, of the impacts of climate change, but also the different possibilities that different groups can contribute in terms of the solutions on adaptation or mitigation. So tonight it's a very good opportunity to hear from the findings about what is that countries are already doing, where do they see the challenges, how can we support countries to accelerate these efforts and to really achieve the goal that we want to achieve. So without any further ado, I would like to give the floor and mainly the floor and the space to the AGN chair to share with us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. With your permission, Honorable Ministers, if I may speak while seated. Let me acknowledge the presence of the two Honorable Ministers from the Gambia. We appreciate your presence, particularly that we are discussing the issue of gender and we have two distinguished female ministers. It is really motivating and we're grateful for being around. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency, the Ambassador of Gambia as well, who has also joined us. This is really motivating. I think in all that I need to pay tribute to our hardworking lead coordinator on gender from Gambia, Madam Fatou Gayo. I think she's put all this together. It is through our work that she's been able to bring the two distinguished honorable ministers and our ambassador to give us this support at this event. I also wish to thank UNDP, who is providing support to us, and of course the European Union for providing the resources to this. For us at the African group, gender is a very important aspect. And right this year, at the beginning of the year, it was one of the priorities that we identified that we needed to do a lot of work on gender. And so we reached out to our partners, and UNDP was quick to step in, that they would like to support this. It's not just the study that Priscilla is going to share with us, which has been done. We were supposed to have young female negotiators here at COP27. We had plans on the ground to have those young, particularly female negotiators on the ground to undergo the training, but also participate in the actual negotiations, because we need to strengthen the AGN and also ensure that we have a number of female negotiators. I'll tell you, and I know I may not be very popular with my male negotiators who may be here, but when you see most of the work that we are doing, I'm surrounded mostly by female negotiators, and there is a difference between the diligence, the commitment, and the keeping of time in terms of delivery, what you get from us as male negotiators and what you get from the female negotiators. When you agree on milestones, we need this, we have this deadline, this is required, you are rest assured of receiving that. Oh, Julius, no harm, no offense, man. You are rest assured of receiving that from the female negotiators promptly, even before time, than you will from the male negotiators. But that is just that is ancillary in terms of the contribution. But when you look at climate change as well, when we come to the disaggregated impacts of climate change, the way it is impacting the different, not only the different abled, but the different genders, it is very clear that our women, our mothers and sisters are bearing the brunt of climate change. They are not only the caregivers, they are the homemakers. They have to ensure that water is available at home, food is available at home, and we know in our setting, having all these requires that you are interacting with natural resources, and the changes in climate are not making this easier. So having a study and understanding this is very important for us, because when you go into the negotiations, we need the figures, we need the statistics, so that we are not just negotiating from emotions, but we can put figures on the ground that strengthen our case. So the study that Priscilla will be presenting to us in terms of the findings on how we are integrating gender in our national determined contributions is very important, and we thought that we could have this side event to get these results and see how this can be shared. I don't want to take long, but except to look forward to the findings of the study that Priscilla will be sharing with us, and really excited that we are joined by all of you, but particularly to have our ministers in our midst. We know it's not easy, but this is what we request from you, honorable ministers. Tomorrow we'll be briefing you and AMSEN. Our technical phase of the negotiation has ended. As we brief you tomorrow, we are actually passing on the mantle, we are handing over. It's this resilience and commitment to remain around in the evening, because most of the crunch negotiations will take very late at night, and so we know that we have strong allies in you who will keep behind you and supporting you as you work in the trenches, because next week it's not really our role. So with that, I thank you very much, and we look forward to the study findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you very much for these words. And it's true, we feel very honored to have the ministers joining us today, the ambassadors. I also want to point out there are many colleagues that are working, hardly really to get this area of work into the different policy instruments and into the different processes. I also would like to mention the gender focal points that are also part of this process. And with your support, I'm sure that they can reach a lot in this agenda. So thank you so much also for joining us today. So I would like to then give the floor to Priscilla, so then you can please share with us the findings of the technical. And as the chair was saying, we are continuing this collaboration towards the organization of a regional workshop where we can bring different junior and new women and also a few men as well, delegates, to discuss and talk about the UNFCCC process and also about the gender and climate nexus. So Priscilla, I'll give the floor to you. Thank you.
With your kind permission, may I stand, please? First and foremost, I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the AGN chair and his team, the secretariat, who supported me so much in carrying out this research, and my sister, Fatu, whom in the middle of the night I will call. I said, I'm stuck. What I do? And I can send her 10 emails at the same time in 1 minute, and she will respond. Say, Priscilla, I'm going to respond to you. So thank you very much, honorable ministers. It was so beautiful seeing you yesterday in the negotiation room. That gave us hope, that gave us strength. And you know, as African women, I was really proud to see you witnessing what was happening during the negotiation. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here indeed. I want to start by saying that the AGN, led by Honorable Shettima, has indeed shown leadership when it comes to the issues of gender. And of course, I'm not saying this is the first time, but this is one of the first things that I'm witnessing on the continent that we are carrying out this kind of study. So for me, when I was given this opportunity, I took it very seriously, and I loved it, and I said, no matter the challenges, I'm going to do it. So thank you very much for showing leadership, particularly on the issues of gender, and we are hopeful that if we have champions like you, in African continents, the issues of gender will move forward. Having said that, this study, we started it actually in July, sometimes August, and the study is on gender responsive climate actions in Africa. This is just like a summary. It's a very full-fledged report, and I want to thank people like Fatuma who gave me very incisive comments when I submitted the first draft, and the national gender focal points, and of course, all the national focal points who committed to this. I was calling them in the middle of the night. Somebody will tell me, I'm driving, when I get home, I will respond to you. Thank you so much for your commitment and for the support, because indeed, this shows that all of us have keyed into this. Now, like I said, the technical paper on gender responsive climate actions in Africa is out of the many initiatives that the AGN has planned to strengthen the issues of gender climate actions priorities on the continent. It is very rare to see the AGN to do this, but they have taken it as just one of the initiatives. And of course, it analyzes gender commitments relevant to African countries, creating an enabling environment that support the implementation of gender responsive climate actions, and gender responsive implementation of, my sister will say, adaptation before mitigation. So I'm correcting that, that the Africa prefers adaptation before mitigation. So I'm going to correct that. Adaptation actions in different sectors. It also identifies best practices across Africa that showcase national actions to ensure the development and implementation of responsive climate policies and strategies. What method did we use? Africa is so big. Now, with 54 countries, how did we get to the selection and leave out others and take us in? It was a very difficult task, but with the guidance of the AGN and the Secretariat, we were able to select some countries, at least 3 from each of the sub-regions of Africa, the 5 sub-regions. So in all, we are supposed to have 15 countries to be interviewed or to carry out this study. And this study follow up key informants interviews, which engages government, CSOs, development partners, gender focal points in the country, national focal points, and some key other ministries, such as agriculture, women, Ministry of Women Affairs, and some people within there. The key informants interview, we collected information from a total of 12 countries. Like I said, 15 countries we are supposed to collect this information from, but we ended up having 12 countries, which is Liberia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, Gambia, Malawi, DRC, Zambia, Cameroon, Rwanda, and Tunisia. In North Africa, however, while Tunisia submitted the document, requested and participated in the interviews, we were able to do a literature review for Egypt, because I want us to know that Egypt is very important, and I know the efforts that the AGN chair, including his team, to make sure that we reach out to the Egypt team, but maybe because of the presidency of the COP, most of them were fully engaged, so we couldn't really interview anybody from Egypt. So that is one of the challenges that we face. So a total of 31 interviews were conducted across 12 countries. Now, how did we select selection of the countries? The study countries were purposely selected based on their national gaps and or articulation and integration of gender into the updated NDCs and other key climate policies and planning instruments, such as national adaptation plans and long-term low emissions and climate development strategies and climate finance through gender responsive budgeting. That was the criteria that we used, and in each of the region, we tried to review, we did a literature review to see, at least online, to see what was happening in this continent and in these countries. And that was how we came about the selection of these countries. Like I said, in North Africa, In Central Africa, we have Cameroon and DRC. In East Africa, we have Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. North Africa, we have Tunisia and Egypt. South Africa, we have Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. And in West Africa, Gambia, Liberia, and Nigeria. Let me also state that part of the selection criteria was that there are some countries that are doing so much at the national level, but at this space where we are now, they are not being heard. So we took that into cognizance as well, so that it's not just focused on countries that are doing very well, but also are not at the global space. What is stopping them from being at the global space? We took that into cognizance. So here, analysis of how we came about some of those things. Look at effective governance, integrated policies, and inclusive planning for gender-responsive climate actions. And for effective governance, we look at the issues of political will to ensure effective governance. How many of those countries had the political will to be able to integrate or even mention gender into their NDCs, right from the initial NDCs and up to the updated one? So that was one of the things that we look at it. And so from there, some level of political will is reflected in the NDCs and other policies of the countries. But limited capacity and expertise to constitute a major drawback. For example, in Cameroon, limited knowledge on gender issues by decision makers was reported as a factor that is affecting the effective integration of gender into adaptation and mitigation plans. And on inclusive planning, evidence-based planning, besides the NDCs, there also exist different national and sectorial plans as noted. A major gap observed relate to weak gender analysis and evidence-based plans. In most of the African countries examined, there is limited research on best practices, use of technology and requisite evidence to support negotiations and development of gender-responsive climate change adaptation and mitigations actions. On integrated policy frameworks, non-inclusive policy framework, where there are various inclusive policies, institutional and implementation frameworks in many countries studied, a need to promote an inclusive policy network was also observed in many African countries, including Zambia. An absence of gender or gender-aware policy in the water sector and other sectors was noted, and there is no negotiator from the water sector despite a need for it. For effective governance, institutional coordination, a good number of implementing and coordinating agencies were observed in different countries, pointing to possible political will, but their coordination was also observed to be limited in some countries. For example, in DRC, there is weak interagency cooperation on various sectors that relate to climate change and gender. Weak institutional coordination and communication among different key sectors and actors were also observed in Cameroon. Depth of the plans. There's noticeable progress in terms of the design of inclusive policy, as noted, well, this one is in the full report, section 3.3. However, some gaps were also noted in some countries in relation to the availability and depth of their action plans. In Cameroon, there's a national gender policy, but it does not take into consideration climate change, though the National Development Strategy 2030 has some strategic points focusing on gender. Integrated policy, limited funding to implement proclaimed policy actions. Limited funding is the major barrier to the implementation of various policies and plans in the majority of the African countries examined. For example, in Liberia, limited financial support is a leading factor that undermines the implementation of gender-responsive climate actions plans. Insufficient budgetary support from the national government and other partners to the principal institutions and organizations that support the fight against climate change was also reported. For stakeholders coordination, there exists some weak stakeholders coordination capacity for the implementation of diverse and multisectoral activities, While some countries mention the contribution and cooperation with CSOs as part of their strengths, many do not have an effective capacity and coordination framework. Some focal points do not have reasonable information on the activities of various civil society organizations that are funded by different international donor agencies. Inclusive planning, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. African countries need capacity strengthening on meaningful monitoring, evaluation, and reporting of gender and climate issues. In almost all of the African countries examined, limited information exists on interventions designed to track the progress achieved in the targeted gender goals. Many of the interventions log frames were without specific gender outputs and outcomes. This contributes to limiting the existing efforts. Capacity to implement policies. African countries have varying policies and strategies that are very useful for meaningful gendered climate adaptation and impact mitigation. To harness these opportunities, lots of capacity strengthening are required. Human resources capacity and specific technical capacities need to be developed or strengthened. Training of key gender actors and stakeholders, as well as increased and high levels of sensitization and awareness creation among stakeholders are needed in countries such as Cameroon, Liberia, Tunisia, and Nigeria. Now here, while we look at all those, we also look at some selected good examples of practice going on in Africa when it comes to the issues of climate change. For instance, they have some other. Most of these countries gave us a lot of initiatives and include in the report. And what women's rights to land ownership through lands, the initiative was a study conducted by one organization, and it revealed that about 70% of women in DRC lacks access to land and forest rights and are not involved in the decision-making processes related to forest governance. Now, what was the intervention to address this issue? The initiative was implemented in 4 regions of DRC for the national authorities and customary leaders to recognize the right of women on land and forest titles and include women's participation in climate action. This resulted in women's active participation in forest governance and forest management policies for climate actions. There are several key actors, and this works with NGOs and community. The government partner with them. In Kenya, there's the initiatives, Kenya Gender Analysis. The initiatives is to address gender differentiated impacts of climate change, the degree to which people are affected, and their vulnerability. To understand the differentiated impacts of climate change in sector-specific gender analysis to comprehend existing inequalities regarding access to control and use of resources, as well as the participation and benefits to various gender groups. Now, what is the intervention that Kenya did? The initiative explored the existing gender inequalities considering access to, control, and use of resources and participation and benefits for women and men. It also examined the extent to which gender issues are mainstream in Kenya's climate change-related policies, legal and institutional frameworks, and their suitability for supporting gender-responsive climate change actions. This was supported by various stakeholders, including UNDP, the German Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, and a host of others. In Rwanda, they also have Kenya Gender, that is supposed to be Rwanda, not Kenya again, analysis. The initiative is to do an analysis of the gender gaps in renewable energy. The studies clearly indicated that the energy sector remains one of the industries with a wide gender gap globally, particularly in Africa. However, experts recognize that promoting women's participation in the decision-making roles in the energy sector can expand inclusive economic growth, profitability, and sustainability of the energy sector. The power sector in Africa is traditionally male-dominated, with few women participating in the workforce and indeed in the leadership where it comes to anything that has to do with energy. Now, what was the intervention? The Women in Renewable Energy Initiative is collaborating with the Rwanda energy companies on a 3-month mentorship and on-the-job training of 115 female graduates from universities and technical colleges to gain the skills and experience needed to launch their careers in the energy sector. And this is supported by USAID and Power Africa together with the government, Rwanda government, and private sectors. In Uganda, we have an initiative titled Improving Women's Income and Resilience to Climate Change in Uganda. And the intervention has been setting and upscaling of agricultural enterprises for women's groups, training on alternative income sources for women's groups. And this is funded by the European Union, the government agency FOA, and the district local governments of Uganda. In Tunisia, we have the initiative called Acacias for All, Women Fighting Desertification in Tunisia. And the intervention is restoration of degraded ecosystems and reforestation, and of course, sustainable agriculture. And this is being supported by various actors, such as research institutions, government agencies, and private sectors. In Zambia, we have an initiative which is the Cashew Infrastructure Development Project. And the intervention has been the cashew production value addition to reduce poverty, assistance to 60,000 beneficiaries comprising 30,000 women along the cashew value chain, starting from production, processing, and marketing. And this is supported also by various government and civil society. In Gambia, we have an initiative called Promoting Sustainable Cooking Energy in Communities. And the intervention is to promotion of sustainable cooking energy solutions in communities and grassroots adoption of clean energy and distribution of energy-efficient cook stoves, supported cook stoves in communities to reduce fuel wood and charcoal consumption for energy purpose, reduction of budget for fuel wood and charcoal in households, and CO2 emission reduction. 300 energy-efficient cook stoves have already been distributed, and this is supported by UNDP. In Nigeria, we have an initiative controlling chemical fertilizers and pesticide use through organic farming in Dobi and Padaga communities in Gwagwarara Area Council of Abuja FCT. The aim of the project is to promote sustainable agriculture and combating climate change through the adoption of organic farming practices in the farming communities, training of women farmers on the production of organic fertilizer and pesticides. Several organizations are also supporting this. Now, what are the needs of African countries for the acceleration of the implementation of their gender-responsive climate adaptation and mitigation actions? First, one of the things that we got was that we need a functional coordination and reporting of activities. There is limited information which exists on what is going on in different locations. The focal points and the central government lacked information on various activities that are ongoing in their own countries. So there is a need to promote and support cooperation among agencies, focal points, and subnational administrative units to enhance effective coordination, data collection, and reporting. The second one has to do with the issues of awareness, the issues of internal resources. Africa needs a strong capacity to mobilize resources internally. The issues of technology and research capacity is also issues that the African continent needs. The African negotiators' capacity needs for effective gender integration. We had, apart from the interviews that we did, we also had an online survey which we conducted, and a total of 21 young negotiators completed the survey. Out of those that reported that responded to the survey stated that they have good knowledge about gender and climate action, including the context and how to go about their negotiations, and the positions of other non-African negotiators were relatively small, as can be seen. 5.3% did not know at all, 47.4% had the knowledge to a little extent, 31.6% stated they know to a moderate level, and 15.8% stated that they have knowledge about gender and climate actions. The need for capacity development was also developed among the older negotiators from Africa, because they believe that it's not just the young people that need the capacity building, Mr. Chair, that they need to also to be involved. So when you are having your training, that they want to also to be involved. The continent and African Union member countries also need to be equipped, especially when it comes to the issues of climate change and how gender can also be involved, including training. Now, what is the way forward? One of the things that we got from the research is that skills and capacities training for gender mainstreaming is very important. African monitoring and peer review framework, which is what NEPAD is doing, that needs to be also done in this regard. Conduct a comprehensive gender analysis on the different sectors. Of course, adaptation and mitigation planners should ensure gender is integrated into projects, activities, and indicators. Budgeted support for gender mainstreaming efforts within ministries, departments, and agencies. Collection, analysis, and reporting of sex disaggregated data is also very important. Harmonize the coordination of efforts and strengthen working synergy across different ministries and agencies on the planning and implementation of gender-responsive climate adaptation and mitigation actions, strengthen the capacity of young Africans in negotiating and funding support to attend COP. I want to thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. This was really interesting since, as you can see, we have been able to collect a lot of good experiences and the building blocks that many of the countries in the region are doing to incorporate gender into their climate change policy processes. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for that. I would like now to give the floor to our colleagues from the countries, so you can provide, from your perspective, where do you see the areas of opportunity, and as well the areas of that require additional support? So please, I will give the floor to Ms. Pacifica Ogola, Director, Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And thank you, Chair. I know our Chair, AGN Chair, needs to go to the plenary. So I'm going to go and come and sit here. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for coming with us. And so I will give the floor to you, Pacifica, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister, Honorable Ministers, Ambassador, colleagues in the room. I'm accompanied here by my focal points for gender and a colleague from climate finance. So these are the real gender experts for Kenya, and you can see one of our gender focal points is a man, because when you're talking about gender, we talk about men, women, and children. So we tried as much as possible to balance. Priscilla has done a very good job summarizing what we are doing in Kenya. But from a national perspective and from an African context, I think that there are a lot of issues that we need to address to unlock the gender issues that we are experiencing. In Kenya, we have a constitution that clearly states what the gender composition of any office or any activity should be. It should be at least 1/3 of any appointments of anything that we do in the country. That is not more often than not, we don't meet that threshold. We also have in our Climate Change Act, which recognizes the importance of mainstreaming gender issues in our actions, and also the imposition to do a gender strategy to make sure that climate change work mainstreams and actually ensures that gender issues are mainstream. And recently, Kenya reviewed the land policy, and in that policy now, even the female children have an equal right to inherit, because that was seen as a barrier to development for many women. But still, despite the policies, despite the institutional framework, despite all this, I think, and now I want to just talk from my own personal experience, is that we really need to break down the traditional barriers and to reach out, for, especially when it comes to women and children, and to reach out to the male colleagues, and to make sure that they're able to relate to what the women are going through. I give an example when we have severe droughts in the Horn of Africa, and I was talking to one of my colleagues from Somalia, and I think part of 80% of Kenya is suffering the drought like Somalia, and whatever food that is there, that is little, that has been brought to the table, more often than not, the men will be fed first, and the male children, and then the women, and then the girl child, will eat last. And even among the same communities, you'll find that they still, much as we talk about women, men, there are men who are also poor, and there are women who are poor. And the poorest women, from what we have seen in our pastoral communities, are the female-headed households. So it's very, very important that we understand, if we are talking about mainstreaming, yes, in the policies, yes, but you have to go down to the ground and understand what's going on in the ground. The female-headed households, some who are landless, their resilience and capacity to bounce back is way different from the ones who are married and who have assets. So I think these are things that we have seen when it comes to bouncing back from things like a severe drought or a flood event. And again, another thing that I've seen that I think can be very key is the lack of education, like women not getting a chance to go to high school, has also reduced their ability for growth and for development. And I think that at that level, we need to think about microfinancing schemes beyond policies, like how do we make sure that the most vulnerable of the vulnerables are supported to access financial financing, and are supported to make sure that they reach some level of adaptable situation, or if not resilience. And in Kenya, we have the Women Fund, and for them to access that Women Fund, most of the time they work in groups. And it's through those groups that we are able to make sure that even the ones who are not able are included and are trained and are able to rise up to the next level. So in our various sectors and in the NDCs, we have seen progress in adoption of solar lanterns, and one of the reasons why we see accelerated adoption of solar lanterns, which has improved even the health of women and young children in the kitchen, and even men, is because of the microfinancing scheme that we had through our mobile phone banking called M-Pesa, which is able to give revolving funds and small loans to women and children. So this has accelerated the shift from use of kerosene to use of solar lanterns and even solar PV. It has a lot of men even investing in solar to watch TV and to do, so the entire spectrum benefits from lighting, from TV, from charging phones. So we still have a long way to go in terms of institutional governance to make sure that we have gender desks, and Jackie will confirm, in the Kenyan government we have gender desk in all offices. Whether or not that works, I don't know. In some ministries it works. Ministry of Energy, they already have a gender policy for the ministry. In a company where I used to work for, like Kengen, there are only times when they would only advertise and recruit women only, so that they can balance the gender the gender gap in their institution. And there were times also when they have mentoring opportunities for both men and women and the most vulnerable of the vulnerables, giving scholarship to make sure that you pull them out of the situation, where they are. So, not to bore you, but to summarize, this should go beyond policy, and to unlock. We should have like good case examples of what other countries are doing, and I think those ones we can pull them out as case studies, things that can be scaled up and replicated across the continent. For our negotiators, I'm happy as Kenya, we have very young negotiators, and I think one of them is our youth, and we have a lot of them, and I think this time around Kenyan delegation might be the biggest. I'm just praying it's not, but it might be the biggest because we brought everyone. We gave everyone who needed to come to COP the party badge, and we are molding all of them to really rise to the occasion and to be aware of what is going on globally. Because if they are not aware, then they cannot. And even indigenous people. Today I gave somebody from indigenous community a badge because when they are on the ground and they want to come here, it's only by creating platforms for them. To say their story, not through us. Let them come here or create a platform for them at home to tell their story and to say where the shoe is pinching and what is needed for them to succeed in whatever initiative. Some of them just need a very small boost to go to the next to the next level of independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pacifica. Thank you. It's really interesting, the points that you have made in terms of the structural barriers and how to really, address and go beyond the policy into action and find also the different vehicles to achieve this implementation through finance, through increased understanding, through data and information, and also through the different systems that could track the actual implementation targets that countries have included in their policy instruments, such as the NDCs. Yeah, definitely, we need to keep this journey going. We need to move from the pledges, from the commitments into the action. And I think that's really important. Thank you so much. I would like now to give the floor to Ms. Ominia El Omrani. I hope I pronounce correctly your name. So thank you for joining us today. Ms. El Omrani is the official or the president youth envoy for COP27 from the government of Egypt. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm proud to say that we met in Gabon, and in Kenya it has been so inspiring to see so many young climate negotiators and delegates. And I always use Kenya as an amazing example for that. Hi everyone, I'm Omnia. I am the COP27 President Youth Envoy, and this is the first time that a COP presidency creates a position within the team for a young person. And the aim is to really link the needs, the challenges, and the solutions that young climate activists and leaders face, and to be directly mainstreamed into the work of the presidency. Because in Egypt we have a very strong commitment towards the empowerment of youth. We have every year the World Youth Forum. We also have for the first time the establishment of the UN Youth Office that happened on a global level, and it was tabled by Egypt. But today is also about the importance of the voices of youth, but also the voices of women and girls, and how to empower that. I am also a young medical doctor. I'm doing my training in plastic and reconstructive surgery. And what I've seen on the ground is how disproportionate the health of people affected by climate change. I see it here in Egypt because of the increasing temperature, the number of patients presenting with acute heat stress, also the number of exacerbations of asthma because of high levels of air pollution. But we also know that air pollution affects women more than men because of indoor air pollution. action, and this has been statistically proven. It's also been proven that extreme weather events that we are seeing now in Africa and around the world, from the cyclones to the flooding to the hurricanes, they kill more women than men. So, but on the other hand, what we see in the global policy-making space is that less women are represented and less women are seen in the environmental governance and the policy-making space for climate action. So, as you said, we say that this is the COP of implementation, and that is why in Egypt we wanted to lead by example in our own national strategy, which I want to share a few points around that. One thing we focus on is promoting gender-sensitive perspectives within our national plans when we're thinking about adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage. And when we're thinking about mitigation specifically and the plans that we have and the commitments towards just transition, is how can we provide a separate scheme or a more empowered scheme for women when it comes to the provision of green jobs, as well as the access to green job opportunities, but also providing specific credit lines for women to increase their participation in green economic opportunities. But one thing we're also looking at is how can we, when we're working on climate finance and climate literacy, providing women and girls with the opportunities to access climate literacy, capacity building initiatives and understanding, because it is a win-win situation when it comes to empowering women to take on higher end green jobs, and at the same time be able to provide for themselves and for their families, as well as building their capacity in digital tech and climate tech solutions to also enhance access to job opportunities. One also of the key plans and priorities that we have, and this is also in collaboration with our National Council for Women, is really to increase the representation and the participation of women in the governance around environment and around climate change. We have our Minister of Environment, Dr. Yasmin Fouad, but we're also ensuring that this representation is went across all the different ministries, especially when issues that address climate change, whether it's from health, finance, as well as adaptation and mitigation. But one thing I want to also share more concretely, apart from our mechanisms in terms of ensuring gender equality and gender representation, is an initiative that we did, which is called the National Smart Green Governorate Initiative. It was launched before COP, 3 months before COP. The aim was to ask all the different governorates to submit smart and environment-friendly projects, and then they will be shortlisted so that they can come to COP and present their project. We received 6,800 projects from all over Egypt, and then the 6,800 projects were shortlisted to 167, and then the 167 became 18, which are now here at COP, and there's an hour every day where a part of these initiatives are being presented. But what was very interesting about this initiative, and I was part of the selection panel and the criteria curation, is that we had a certain criteria to assess the smart element and the green element of each project, but we also had a separate criteria for initiatives and projects that were led by women, because we also wanted to assess how gender sensitive they are, but how gender transformative they are in terms of how it was benefiting women, how it was directed to the needs of women, and where women leading, having leadership roles within these projects. And I was responsible, together with UN Egypt, the National Council of Women, as well as the Egyptian Trade Union, in assessing these projects so that we give them and empower them with more space to be able to present their own initiatives and put a different caliber to how projects can be directed to women's needs as well as women's empowerment. So what I want to say that it's important, as it was said before, to translate local efforts, and we need to also listen to the needs, especially of the communities. And you know, as young climate leaders and activists, we are always at the front line working with our communities, but we're always seeking the opportunity and the space to be part of the spaces where the decision making takes place, such as COP and other fora. We very much appreciate and underline the importance of countries like Kenya, for example, having us and having our voice and having our participation as civil society members, but also as climate negotiators to negotiate on behalf of our demographic as young people, but also on behalf of the voices of the most vulnerable, including women and girls. And also it's important to say that climate change affects our health disproportionately as women. It also affects our access to education as girls. And this has been proven last year by the Malala Foundation. If we continue in the under the climate inaction that we are seeing now and the inadequate climate pledges, more than 12.5 million girls around the world will not get access to the education that they need because of the extreme weather events that will be driven by climate change. So now it's the time to move to implementation, move to action. But when we do that, when we go back to our own countries, it has to be done hand in hand with the young climate leaders in your country, with the women, with the girls, as natural and key partners to implementing this on the ground with our communities. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minya. I think you highlight very important aspects, not only the youth representation, the effective participation, but also aspects that are related to the governance structures that should allow for this participation to be on an ongoing basis, to open the space of decision making to be more inclusive, and also to look, as you were saying, at the local level. How can we bring the different actors from the local level, from civil society organizations to the local administrations as well, far more involved into the implementation of climate change concrete solutions. So thank you so much for that. Well, I think that we have run out of time. I think we are getting really to the end. I don't know if we have like a couple of minutes just to open the floor in case there is a question in the audience for the panelists before we close the event. So I'll open it for just a couple of minutes, since I know that the time has passed really quickly. So one question here, please. Let me just share the mic with you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Basi. I work with Hip City Innovation Center in Nigeria. I don't know if it's a question, but maybe something just to get our mind thinking based on the presentation by Dr. Priscilla. So in her presentation, she talked about the issue around institutional coordination. And then she also mentioned the issues around political will and gender budgeting. So I'm trying to say, how do we link all of these things up? Because if we talk about institutional coordination, it therefore means that all the line ministries have to understand the issues and then come together in budgeting also together, such that each of the activities and actions fit into another, and not the present silo activities that we're seeing across countries, where the Ministry of Women Affairs is doing a component of it, and then it's being replicated at the Ministry of Youth and Sport and all of that. So all of the line ministries have to understand the issues going on. And then how do we drive this institutional coordination, gender budgeting along the line of political will, such that we have a holistic approach towards gender responsive climate action in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe we can take like two more questions, and then we give the mic back to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It was an excellent analysis. I come from a war zone area. I left my country when I was 16 and a half, and I'm now mature, and all these years, all I know is war. Can you imagine? I have been a diaspora, and the war had affected me. How is it affecting the women in the war itself? When we analyze gender with climate action, we cannot forget the areas where the war zone area, because war has a worse negative impact on climate change than CO2 and methane combined, because it affects the vegetation, livelihood, pastoral life, and all this. So we need to include about women who are in the war zone area.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. The contexts that are fragile and in crisis certainly get more affected by the impacts of climate change and less capacity for resilience. That's clear. Let me bring the mic here.
Okay. Thank you for the sharing the presentation. Me, I'll give to my question in French. Donc, par rapport à cette question, je voudrais parler un peu pour le cas de la Guinée. Parce que nous, en République de Guinée, tous les ministères ont mis en place d'abord les services genre et équité. Many ministries in Guinea dispose an office gender and equality. After Ministry Environment and Sustainable Development, focal point, gender and climate change. This me, Mrs. Biliga Koivugi. Guinea integrates gender and the CDN, NDC, Guinea, integrate gender. This presentation no hymn for Guinea and many countries. My question: what selection country in the experience key for the gender responses climate action in Africa? Okay. Je peux combiner en français? Voilà, donc je disais, nous, au niveau de la Guinée, tous les ministères, d'abord, parce qu'il faut, ces questions de genre là, il faut se situer d'abord au niveau des politiques. La reconnaissance du genre au niveau des politiques. Si le genre est pris en compte au niveau des politiques, c'est que nous pouvons réclamer nos droits. Donc chez nous, c'est au niveau des politiques d'abord qu'on commence à s'imposer. Moi-même, je suis membre du comité national climat. Donc, ma présence au sein de ce comité climat, c'est ce qui fait aujourd'hui que notre CDN actualisé a appris à intégrer l'aspect genre dans notre CDN. Donc, en date, on cherche à élaborer une stratégie nationale genre et changement climatique, assortie d'un plan d'action quinquennal. Nous avons déjà fait des émissions au niveau de PNUD. Même cette année, PNUD a renforcé les services. Il n'y a pas seulement que le point focal, il y a le service qui est en rang de division, qui est doté des cadres. En plus de ça encore, toujours par rapport à cette question, la francophonie a appuyé chaque année depuis 2020, la francophonie continue à renforcer des capacités. En 2020, ils ont eu à renforcer 10 femmes guinéennes. En 2021, ils ont renforcé 10 femmes guinéennes. En 2022, ils ont renforcé 5 femmes guinéennes. Et l'année dernière, la COP26, moi, j'ai été prise en charge par la francophonie pour participer à la COP. Donc, moi, ce que je souhaiterais, il faudrait que les expériences, nos aînés qui sont à la tête, cherchent à contacter les autres points focaux genre pour avoir des informations réelles au niveau des autres pays. Parce que nous sommes là pour faire un mouvement d'ensemble pour vraiment l'avancement de l'Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Let me see if maybe the panel would like to make a few comments regarding these 3 questions, and then, yeah, there was one more, and then maybe we can give the floor back to the panelists, and then we see if we can come back with more questions. Thank you. Okay, perfect.
Good evening to you all. Thank you very much, Dr. Priscilla, for the wonderful presentation, and all the panelists for the amazing contribution to this very important topic. My name is Awasila. I'm from the Gambia. I work with the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Project. For me, I consider gender as a DNA for any successful development initiative. For us, in our project, we have 50% target to meet for women, but we are still struggling, or even gender in general. We believe that gender is the DNA. So having men, women, the differently able, trying to create a balance is always a challenge, because when we have rural communities to target and land ownership is actually a challenge. When you have 3,000 hectares of agricultural land to restore, and most of the lands are owned by men, so it's always a challenge, but we are trying to figure it out. My question is, with regards to your study, what are the limitations of your study, and what are the implications for further research? Thank you. Implication for further research.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Yeah, I was going to give you the mic, but you already.
Thank you very much, UNDP, for organizing this side event. And I want to thank all the panelists for their presentations. Looking at the presentation on the findings of the gender study, we are all aware that climate change affects everybody, but that it impacts on women differently. And the reasons are many. You look at women's triple roles: productive, reproductive, and community roles. Women are the ones who collect fuel wood, they collect water, they do the cooking, and they're also farmers, both commercial and subsistence. And they're also entrepreneurs, because when they harvest their produce, they sell in the markets. So if you look at all those, climate change affects them more than it does other gender. And then I listened to Priscilla's presentation. The study is important because study gives us the data which is required for policy development and program development. It also is a situational analysis, gives us a baseline, so that when we implement programs, we are able to track results. If you don't have a baseline, you cannot measure impact. So this is where also such a study is very important. I know the sample size is small because of the time frame. You are given a limited time frame. And I've seen that countries are also at different levels. I presume because they are at different levels, there may be need for them to learn from each other. What has worked well in one country, which we can replicate in another. And then the issue of mainstreaming climate change in our programs. This is also very important. So that we can be able to implement activities that we have outlined as recommendations for ourselves. And then when you do that, when you mainstream, then you will be able to come up with proper programs and also budgets, because you mainstream first, and then you program, and then you budget for implementation. The other thing I also want to talk about is the issue of financing. Because after all, we are not doing this study just for doing its sake. We would like to implement the recommendations. And that's where the financing also comes in. And we'll have to see how best we can get the required funding to implement all the recommendations that we have set for ourselves. I think it's a good study, and then it's something that I want to reckon with. Yeah, because until you do a study, we make out of comments, but sometimes we intervene without doing research. But when you do a research, you are able to know what the problems are, and you can come up with better recommendations. I want to thank you very much for the study. The last presenter, Ayut, I think you are quite right. Our climate actions should be all-inclusive. We shouldn't leave anybody behind. Men, women, young people, but let's remember, the magnitude on all of them is different. So when we are implementing, we take that into consideration. And that can only be known if you do a study as it has already been done, so that we know how to approach men, women, and young people with disability, the elderly, and the vulnerable. I'm mentioning the last because my ministry is in charge of women, children, the elderly, people with disability, and the vulnerable. And on all of them, climate action impacts differently. So let's bear that into our programming and also our implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your reflections. I think I'm going to give 1 minute to each of you, and then I think we will have to close. I'm really sorry about that. It's just that they're almost closing the venue. So I'm going to give 1 minute to the panelists to respond to some of the questions, some of the comments. And then, of course, after the event, Priscilla, if they have any more questions, Priscilla will be here for 1 more week. So please don't hesitate to reach out to her, to clarify any other questions about the technical paper. So shall we start here? 1 minute, yes? Thank you.
Just one thing I wanted to add, especially on the point of research, because we need to, recognize that when we're doing research, it has to also be gender sensitive, because sometimes the research that is being done and also led by women in terms of who is conducting the research, who is doing the analysis. We have to be involving and empowering as well, that women are taking the lead for that, so that the research is reflecting the needs of women as presented by Dr. Priscilla.
Yeah, thank you very much. The last thing that I want to say is that as women in leadership, it is also our responsibility to pull up other women and to make sure that the women who are implementing action or are vulnerable are also taken care of. So we have to take deliberate action to always remember that as a woman, we have to remind our male colleagues to remember, even in the intervention, the children who are going to school, and also our youth, so that we make sure that no one is left behind. So I think for me, that is something that I do. I don't know if I've been effective at doing it, but I try as much as possible. I'm also, and I say that because I'm also the current interim president of the African Women at Advancing Geothermal Energy, because I was in that space. And we believe that those of us who got scholarships for training and for learning, we cannot just sit back and sit in our position and feel comfortable. We have to find a way of making sure that we pull others and we engage and we mentor and we create opportunity for them to grow in that space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pacifica.
I will conclude, I understand.
Okay. Thank you very much for the incisive comments that have come out from the presentation. I'll start with the issues of coordination. I think that when we are doing this study, and indeed we observe that most of the ministries and agencies are operating in silos. But of course, every country has its own policies and how they operate. So, for instance, in Nigeria, we have what we call interagency committee on climate change, which means that all the agencies sit at a round table to discuss how their programs will be planned, inclusive of budgeting and financing. But of course, every ministry have their own mandate. So it is always very difficult for you to go and begin to interfere on how that is done. And every ministry have their own budgetary allocation every year. But for the first time in the history of Nigeria, this year, they had a budgetary allocation specifically for the issues of gender and climate change. And that is because we work with them since 2016, and we were able to get, for the first time, a national action on gender and climate change. And of course, we also helped them to develop the framework for implementation. And so when they had the framework of implementation, where is the money going to come from? And so we continue to push. So that is one of the things that we need to do, both from the civil society organizations and from the government. The issues of coordination is very important, because like you said, when we're doing this study, we discovered that most of the ministries are operating in silos. They don't know what the other ministry is doing. So it's also very difficult. So I agree with you that this is very important. And my sister, the issues of selecting conflicts in war zone, especially for this study. If you were here before, I've made a presentation that is also very difficult. Africa is so big. 56, 54 countries. Which one will you select? But there was a purposively template that we use in selecting the countries that participated or the study was being carried out. So it's not as if that was not taken into consideration, and that is where we have DRC as part of the country that we study. We know that DRC is a conflict, the country in a conflict zone. We understand the issues of climate-induced conflicts, and therefore we know that these are some of the issues that we take into consideration. So the question that you asked, I know that there are so many plans that the AGN, which I cannot speak for the AGN, but I know that they have a reason for conducting this study, and I know that the recommendations, they are going to take it forward. I know my sister, whom I've been harassing so much, Fatu, has always been saying, Priscilla, give me precise what we need to do with this study after this, and how the countries can key into it. So please, I know that we know where we are heading to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Ms. Dimitrios Sevgolis, European Union Deputy Head of Delegation. Thank you so much for joining us today, for all the support that we receive from the EU in the development of the technical paper and also the capacity building process. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. Indeed, you might wonder why a white male stands in this panel, but as it was explained, indeed, it is my delegation, it is the European Union actually that is providing support through UNDP to develop the study, but also to progressive platforms like in the Africa Group of Negotiators to raise their voices and their ambition in the UNFCCC negotiations. So. I stay humble here because I have learned a lot here, and it's really amazing all this work that you are doing. I'm really impressed from all these voices from female leaders in the region and all over the world, of course. And I think that we have learned a lot here, and I'm planning to bring all these messages back home because I think we are playing a role in supporting through our development cooperation activities, the activities that you are bringing in your national determined contributions, in your national action plans, and we want to have this gender responsiveness element in all the activities that we're supporting. We're doing the same back home. Of course, challenges might be different in Europe than are in Africa, than are in other regions, but we are trying also from our side to be gender responsive. And maybe as a last point, I think Priscilla's study shows how much important it is to have disaggregated data. I think that's critical. We need this data, we need this kind of research in order to do better planning. And at the same time, we need more capacity. We need to build more capacity in for these activities. So we will continue from our side to provide this kind of support, to build more capacity, and we are looking forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. Well, it is my pleasure to really thank you for being here today. I know it's very late. I know it has been a very long day, and the rush will continue. So thank you so much for coming here today, and have a good night. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are a champion, I have to say.